allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and welcome to the August 31st Special Board of Commissioners meeting. This is intended to be a very short meeting with just a brief agenda. But now that we've done the Pledge of Allegiance, I can say that the first thing we'll do is, as always, start off with public participation. So if you have something, come on up. This will be the only portion of public participation at this meeting. Welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. As I will not be here on the 11th for your next regular traditional meeting, and anticipating the potential for a matter that was removed from your August 14th agenda reappearing on the agenda for that evening, I come before you this evening to speak about my concern about that agenda item and some of the background relating to that agenda item. And that was the agenda item removed from the August 14th meeting, Resolution 2017-100, awarding a contract for the professional design services for the cleaning, repairing, and sediment reduction BMP at the North Wayne Field Park Basin. Again, that was removed from your list. My understanding is at the request of Jim Higgins, who I would, as I understand, proposed its inclusion in the first place as he was away. You recall that back on May 22nd, the last action on the North Wayne Field was a resolution or motion approved by a relatively slim majority to move forward with appointing Gannett Fleming to prepare the RFP for the clean out and improvements to the North Wayne Field Basin. And you may or may not recall that that was after a rather extensive presentation by Dan Weibel from CH2M, in which he quantified to you the fact that that clean out project standing alone as initially engineered would actually exacerbate flood conditions on my street, Willow Avenue, by a number of inches in all but the 10-year flood. In all other three of the measured floods, the conditions there were exacerbated. And you'll also recall me opining, as I have often, that we find that troublesome, objectionable, and potentially a source of legal liability for the township if it proceeds. What you may or may not recall is that on that evening during the presentation of the engineering options, Dan Weibel indicated that there were some relatively inexpensive options available to the township to throttle down the passage of water out of the basin and downstream, resulting in those exacerbations until such time as offset projects. And Dan Weibel suggested two of them, and I think this board all but agreed that the two lowest hanging fruit and lowest cost ones were a retention facility in the parking lot of the Wayne train station on the north side of the tracks at, I think, two basin locations or two retention area locations in that. And also the West Avenue Green Street project, which Dan Weibel opined would at least offset the potential exacerbations if the North Wayne Field Basin would be cleaned out as initially proposed. He also indicated that there were these options available, which included a multiple-sized orifice that could be installed that would allow this board and the Stormwater Fund to have a little more time to bring online those offset projects so as to result in at least a net zero exacerbation on my street. With that being done, and with the timing being done correctly, that would certainly remove any potential liability in the township, because the township would have taken actions to make it no worse than current conditions, yet having the North Wayne Field project and eventually the two offset projects all up and running to achieve that. The agenda item on August 14th is worded, and I know it was pulled off, and I was glad it was pulled off. And I've spoken to Jim Higgins before the meeting started, and there may have been some miscommunication having to do with the wording of that motion. But that resolution suggests that instead of, and I remind the board that at the time you approved the Gannett Fleming appointment to prepare the RFP, There were several members of this board, including, if I recall, Commissioner Booker, who said, this will be back before us. We're going to take a look at this RFP and make sure it has these options included in it so that when we send this out to bid, send this out for, to be bid, we as the board continue to have these offset options or these options to prevent that exacerbation of conditions on Willow Avenue, yet moving forward with the project. That's not how the August 14th resolution was worded. Again, I've met with Jim before the meeting, and we're going to try to get together and take a look at the RFP and see how it came out. Pray that Dan's options were included in the RFP, and if not, perhaps recommend a slight amendment to the RFP to include those. And I think do what the board had indicated the night that they approved again at Fleming. Bring it back before the board so the board can take a look at the RFP before approving the RFP and then sending it out to potential bid. You don't want to confuse the potential bidding contractors, and I don't think you want to skip this step because this board went out of its way to say that would be one of the incremental steps taken because of the concern of the downstream neighbors. When this comes up on the 11th, if it's worded, I hope it's not worded the same way it was on the 14th, because the way it's worded is you skip the step from this board approving the RFP to taking the RFP as maybe some of you have seen it, I don't know, and just sending it out for bid. I think, especially with the sensitivity of the downstream neighbors and the potential liability issue, requires you to take that extra step that you promised those folks you would take. So I'm going to work with Jim. We may be able to get some rewording on the motion, or maybe even get the motion put off a little further down the line from the September 11th meeting to try to see if we can coalesce the neighbors so that you're not hurting some and helping others. And I think the township would be, through an engineering, a relatively inexpensive engineering option, taking a wonderful step to limit its legal liability. Thanks.
All right,
Thank you.
Let me just respond. I think it's axiomatic that engineering has to be consistent and sound before you can go out on the street for bids. I'm not sure, Steve Norsini is not here. I think there might be somewhat of a mix-up on the wording that Ken is worried about. There's no intention here to skip a step. I think our board will want to and has already expressed its desire to see what is in the RFP for the contract work. So on September 11th, what I envision happening is for us to be looking at the design that Steve is recommending go out. I presume that it has Gannett Fleming's name written all over it. And so that's that. Then, Ken, as far as I do want to make sure your voice is heard officially and unofficially, and so also Cynthia Curley. So to that end, before we started, I said let's meet with Steve Norsini as soon as possible and go over your ideas. I looked at the plans today for the existing facility, and it does have smaller orifices. They have one large orifice on outlet and two smaller exit openings on outlet. So I don't know if Dan Weibel understood that when he did his analysis and looked at those plans, but I saw them today on the drawing. But maybe what you're talking about and what he was referring to is something better than that. If it is, and if it makes good engineering sense, then let's do it. My objective here is to make sure all voices are heard, but also to make sure that we go forward and we not take two steps back, or one step back for that matter, and that we move ahead so that we can get relief for all people, including Poplar Avenue, North Wayne Avenue, Willow, Woodland, and Plant. So thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I want to follow up a bit. If we made a promise to do this in two steps, then I'm sure that all of us will want to do that. I don't know that I remember the events occurring the way you described them, but we'll find out. We'll see what it says. Also, I think there's a disconnect between the way you presented it and the reality of what we discussed, meaning that we can't just install an orifice that would have to be engineered before you would install the orifice. This project that we're talking about, I believe, is simply the cleaning. It's not, it's assembled by Gannett Fleming, but it's distinct and different from the design of an orifice. The design of an orifice would then compel us to rerun the models to see what effect the orifice had on the model. So I don't remember the connection that you presented to us a moment ago. I remember discussing the need to mitigate, but I don't remember that mitigation being a trigger for the cleaning of the basin. I don't know if others remember it differently, but that's the way I remember it.
Obviously, clean out only is an option, but among the presentation that Dan made was not just the clean out, but also to improve the functioning of the basin. And it was later in his presentation, and he was specifically asked whether the orificizing could be used to temporarily provide some relief until the offset projects were in place. And it was because of Jim's concern about they would have to be funded through the funding stream, even though they were relatively low-hanging fruit and low-cost projects for the Gulf Creek watershed. It's still, you still have to go through the process of funding them and funding them through the stormwater fee. And that Dan indicated that this might be a way of through the orifice adjustment of eliminating the exacerbation and having the project ready for its full use as soon as the offset projects are in place. So you eliminate not only the exacerbation, but the potential legal liability from downstream residents. I think it would be a good idea for this board, even if this is the watershed moment, to especially when there's the potential for some residents to be injured by a project that helps others. I think stormwater has taken you into a lot of new territory, and this is going to be one of the new territories that it takes you into. And I think that it would behoove the board to take that extra step, to absolutely make sure that, especially when you have an engineer suggesting that here are some options that could possibly help you in the liability situation and not injure some of your residents to help others, at least temporarily until an offset project is put in place. That you take the step to bring the RFP back from Gannett Fleming and expose it to the public in one of your meetings, if for no other reason to say, we took the good advice of the...
I don't think anyone's arguing that, Ken. I think the issue is whether it sounds to me like that the project is a construction project to clean the inlet. And it sounds to me like you believe you believe that what we communicated is that it was a construction project and an engineering project to redesign the orifice. I don't remember it that way. There's a record, we'll find out.
It's been my understanding for some time that when the township would act on this basin, it would not just restore prior conditions, because those conditions were, this was the one that wasn't designed with enough capacity. It wasn't built to design. Steve Norsini opines about how difficult it was to keep this facility up because of the differentials between the design and the construction. My recollection was it was not just a cleanup, but it was also to construct certain improvements to make it function better within the parameters of the school district lease. So I don't know. There's always a possibility that I'm wrong, Don, but I think it's morphed into that quite a while ago, and I think that's why we're proceeding with it, because we can get those two birds with one stone, and this throttle down and protection of the downstream would be a third bird. And again, as far as the process, I just want I think the board committed to it that night, but even if not, it's a good idea. It's a good idea that after you send engineering out, that you show your residents that that engineer did exactly what or if the engineer has some options before you, that instead of delegating that to be a purely staff decision, especially in a sensitive matter such as this that involves legal liability, it's better to deal with it here than in executive session later.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
One minor point on the question of engineering versus just simple clean out. I spoke with Steve today, met with him, as I said, And in connection with our MS4 obligations, he is considering on the inlet side a device to help with sedimentation. Calls it a plunge pool. And so since we have this big grizzly bear we're wrestling with, which is called MS4 compliance, it might make sense for us to take a look at the inlet and the sedimentation aspects so that we don't go ahead with a project and then have to backfit something into it to help us comply with state rules on MS4.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Ken. Is there any more public opinion or public participation? I think there's one item, a piece of information that Bob Zinkowski, our Township Manager, wants to pass on for us, so I'll turn over to Bob for a few moments.
Thanks, Mr. President. I know given the events taking place in the country down at Houston and Texas and Louisiana regarding emergency preparedness, I just wanted to brief the board and also the community on our emergency preparedness in the community, and that over the last 7 years, we've made this a top priority in the township for our emergency preparedness, and response is, I believe, second to none in this area, and that we've drastically improved our emergency operations center, which is state-of-the-art equipment, up-to-date training of all our employees, and that I'm extremely proud and happy to report that our Board of Commissioners have received the same type of training, and they've gone through the course to be able to be prepared for this, which I'm not sure how many other communities can say the same thing for their board and how they're involved with this. Additionally, our readiness has been tested time and time again, and each time we conduct a post-event critique of how we do, and we identify particular areas in which we need improvement. We've had excellent communication system in place, and all our departments work together in unison, assisting one another in confronting any challenges that we have. We have excellent relationships with the local schools, universities that have assisted us with shelter for those who have had to flee their homes. And also we've utilized this township building, which again is the taxpayers' building here in this community. We've opened it for people to stay and been able to provide food for them, for shelter, bedding, shower facilities, source of power for their electronic devices. They've been able to come in and use this building to charge those electronic devices. In every disaster that hits a community, the number one priority has always been the preservation of life, and everything else can be replaced. And we know that there are possessions that people have that there are sentimental values to those, but again, a life is second to none. And that's something we're proud to report that we have, since we've activated these EOCs and all those events, whether or not they're hurricanes, snowstorms, and other major events, we've had 0 fatalities within the township. And we always look to continue to improve those. And again, want to thank the Board of Commissioners for your support for those type of activities within our emergency operations centers, and the support for seeing the priority for emergency response and making sure that we are ready in the event of any type of act of God or major disaster that hits this community.
Good evening, Commissioners. In addition to what Mr. Zinkowski has just explained to the board and our audiences and our township residents, there are additional layers that we have here, I think, that is second to none when it comes to our emergency response in Radnor Township. And some of those layers you're well aware of, and you support the police department and under the direction of the township manager, one of them being the Radnor Citizens Police Academy. What we glean from that is the Radnor CPO, where we have those citizens come back and they assist us in all different types of events, and they're also set up that if we do have these natural or man-made disasters, that they will also respond and assist the police department as well as other first responders in the township, because that's obviously going to be taxed. In addition to that, we've also participated and we run the CERT program, which is the Civilian Emergency Response Team, and that's specifically when we get into these natural disasters, such as they're experiencing in Texas and Louisiana, that members of the CERT team are assigned to their neighborhoods, and they're basically the first responders, because when it becomes to that point where the emergency services are so stretched because of the call volume, you must maintain on the average anywhere from 3 to 6 days. And I would remind the board, as well as all our township residents, with a renewed interest in being ready. And FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, as well as PEMA, Pennsylvania's Emergency Management Agency, has the READY program on their websites. And I would direct everybody to go there because they have the different items that are needed in your go bags so that you can self-sustain for 3 to 5 days if a natural disaster hits before additional resources are received from other regions.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Joe McGuire. I'm a sergeant with Radnor Police Department. I'm also the volunteer fire chief for Radnor Fire Company. And just to let you know about the fire company's preparedness, in the 43 years that I've been with them, we've been to just about every single type of incident that I think you can imagine happening in Radnor Township. And at this point, I can be very proud to say that we've successfully handled all those incidents. As the township does, we also critique what we do afterwards as well. And if we can build upon our past successes by either adding training, equipment, or some other specialized piece that we need to make our jobs better or make us do our jobs better, we do that. We've improved our communication system, so now we have a lot of communications with the township, with the police department, and with the public works. When the EOC is activated here, we put a member of the fire company in here at the EOC to make sure that we have good communication. We also have our own mini EOC that we set up at the fire company as well, where we have one of our command officers there running it so that we can be a little more efficient, because there are times when the county's overrun by calls, and we still want to make sure that we handle all the calls that come into us efficiently in a timely manner so we can take care of all the township residents. So I am very confident in the level of training that our volunteers have, the level of training that we continue to make them maintain each year. And they've stepped up to the challenge so far, and I feel that we're very well prepared for, I'd say, just about anything that we can have thrown at us, because we have been so far.
And I would just like to follow suit with the township manager, what he said, and thank the commissioners, because every one of you have come here when we had the Emergency Operations Center open. In fact, I remember Commissioner Curley walked here in a snowstorm one night. Commissioner Ars sat here with us when we had the NCAA championship. You all spent time with the EOC, and it's because of you're giving us the ability to get that equipment and get that training. And I'm very proud of my people. And I don't just mean the police department, I mean everybody that works in Radnor. We've relocated people that lost power, that needed to go on kidney dialysis, and that's just something that my officers and Public Works take in stride. So we're ready. Hopefully, we pray that we never have anything like what just happened with Hurricane Harvey, but if we do, I'm confident that the resources we have, I think we'll be able to respond in a very effective manner. So.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Chiefs, for that information. And obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with all the folks that are being affected by that storm in Texas and in Louisiana and all the paths in between. It doesn't take much to remember that it doesn't even have to be a storm of that proportions to still have impact. We've lost power. People have been inconvenienced and lost their shelters and all that as well. And so I want to thank you for your creative response opportunities in allowing that to happen, to bubble up, and for the dedication for your staff and for the volunteers who work with you to help us keep us safe during those times of emergencies. So thank you. If there's no other public participation, then we'll move on to our order of business tonight, which is the conditional offer of employment to 2 police officers. And for that, I'd like to pass it over to Chief Colarulo to tell us what that's about.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to do is respectfully ask the board's consideration in the conditional offer of employment for 2 candidates for police officer. The first candidate is Ryan Collins. This young lady finished #1 on the list. She's 29 years old. She graduated from Ridley High School. She also went to Penn State University. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology, and she earned the dean's list with that. She also graduated from the Delaware County Police Academy. She currently lives in Seacane, Pennsylvania, and she works part-time with the Morton Borough Police Department. She's been there since 2016. She's highly regarded by her chief. She went through an extensive background here in Radnor. She successfully went through the background. She passed the polygraph examination, and the most important thing, she passed a rigorous interview process conducted by the township manager, myself, and other people in the staff. The other candidate, who is #2 on the list, is Kyle Hand. He's a 22-year-old young man. He actually has been working for Radnor for over 4 years. He started here when he was 18 as one of our meter people under the supervision of Bill Gallagher. He graduated from the Delaware County Police Academy. He actually put himself through the police academy in the evenings while he was working here at Radnor. He currently works part-time. In addition to Radnor as a part-time meter person, he works for the Sharon Hill Police, and he's been there since May of 2016. He also continued his education. He currently has 54 credits, working towards a degree in emergency management from Delaware County Community College. And he's also a volunteer firefighter. I'd also like to say, if the board approves these conditional offers, since Mr. Zinkowski's been here, we always strive to increase diversity in our workforce. We went from the number of having 1 female officer that this will now give us 4 female officers since Mr. Zinkowski's been here for 7 years. So with that, I respectfully ask your approval. If you do approve a conditional offer of employment, they will then get a psychiatric evaluation and a physical examination. And if they're successful with that and they get hired, they will be on probation for a period of 1 year under the supervision of Deputy Superintendents Block and Flanagan. Thank you.
Mr. President, these 2 positions fill openings. One was created well over a year ago that we have not filled, and the second position fills an opening for an officer that had just resigned recently to join another department. So these fill 2 open positions to staff our department, and nothing more than that. This does not staff any special units or any other items that may have been rumored to that effect.
Did you discuss any budget effects?
These will have no budget effects whatsoever, if that's what you're looking
Yeah,
at, except
meaning the budget effect of this is what we discussed in December of 16 when we passed a budget that created these openings. So this is as per the budget that we passed in 16, is what I'm hearing, Tom.
This will probably be a benefit to us because the officer that had, I believe, left had the higher health care benefit than what the newer officer will be coming in with in regards to the pension and health care contribution. So I believe that's probably what that will address.
Well, also a few times in prior discussions, we've cited that we have openings, so therefore we're actually have extra money, if you will.
Right.
So this doesn't cut into any of that, right?
No, actually, because I believe we had the position budgeted for the full year, so there'll probably be some savings here for the full calendar year.
Thank you.
Well, at this point, I'll entertain a motion to,
I'd like
move
to
we-
move that we offer a conditional offer of employment as probationary police officers to Ryan Collins and to Kyle Hand.
second. All right, is there any other board discussion? Any staff discussion or public? With that, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0. With that, that concludes our business for this evening, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the board for coming in today for this. Thank you.